good evening, and welcome to the Empowering Young Women in a Post-COVID-19 World webinar. We will begin the webinar shortly.
Good evening. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we meet today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this virtual meeting. I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia across the land. Well, welcome everyone. How exciting, our panel discussion in celebration of World Youth Day and 100 years of the Girl Guides New South Wales ACT and NT. Tonight we're going to discuss empowering young women in a post-COVID-19 world, which is really quite, prevalent at this point in time with half the country in lockdown. By way of introduction, my name is Alison Perrott. I am your MC for this evening, and I'm a senior advisor at Ord Minnett, specialising in charities and for-purpose groups and their investment advice. Now, look, COVID-19 and this pandemic, it's presented and is a global challenge of a magnitude not seen outside of war or the Great Depression. Our way of life's been hugely impacted. We've lost emotional face-to-face support. It's causing isolation. There's stress on households, trying to balance work, school, play, and honestly, these life experiences are not really designed to cope with these kinds of stress. And how does one cope? And we thought about that, and we looked at the definition of empowerment. And it's simply the ability of someone acting on their own initiative to pursue their interests in a responsible way, affecting positive change, not only for themselves, but the world around them. So tonight's discussion, we're really fortunate to hear from a range of expert, empowered women on how they've risen to the challenges presented by COVID and, to an extent, life in general. And through enhanced resilience, they're better equipped to affect positive change. And we're really excited to hear from them. In particular, we have the inspirational Young Australian of the Year, Isobel Marshall, and she with her school friend Eloise Hall were empowered to change the world around here for thousands of women globally. We'll also chat with Emily Milton Smith, the State Commissioner, and the vital work that the Girl Guides do. And we also have Nicola Adams, who's a social impact measurement expert, and she's from Huber Social, and she's going to present to us the key findings that some very, very deep work was done by the Girl Guides in relation to outcomes for young women. So let's dive in, shall we? Isobel, I can't wait any longer. I need to know, please tell us what inspired you to found Taboo, an amazing organisation, and the great work that it does globally for young women.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, Alison, and everyone involved in this incredible event. It's great to be involved. I might just quickly start by explaining Taboo briefly to anyone who may not know. Taboo is a brand of organic cotton pads and tampons, and we sell to Australian customers, and all of our net profits, as well as all of our campaigning and advocacy efforts, are all centred around eradicating period. Pretty much means, in essence, we're striving towards a world where no one is disadvantaged because of their period. And to do that, we're making sure that people have access and can afford the menstrual products and support that they need. So that's what we do at Taboo. In relation to your question, why did we start? So my co-founder and best friend from high school, Eloise Hall, and I were very lucky to be leaders at our school in Adelaide. And we went to a leadership conference at Bond University where we learnt about the concept of a social enterprise, which is a business that exists for a social or environmental purpose. And social enterprises look like a whole range of different models. We've got Zambreros. They're a social enterprise. I don't know if everyone has Zambies in their cities and states that you're from, but it's a burrito brand, takeaway, and if you buy a burrito, they'll donate a plate of food to someone in need. So that's their social enterprise structure. Our social enterprise structure is more centered around the net profits that we create. We are taking advantage of a market that's in high demand in Australia, being pads and tampons. Half the population needs them every single month. but we're funneling those profits into people who need menstrual health support around the world. So we learned about that social enterprise model, and we fell in love with it because we understood that we were privileged young people, and we felt that we had a responsibility to use that privilege for the benefit of other people. And we loved the concept of a social enterprise because that really provided a structure that sustainably connected those living in extreme wealth with those living in extreme poverty. And we thought that was really important because we all exist in this world together, and we need these structures connecting and benefiting each other in place. And we love that. And then we started brainstorming the different, I guess, products and services that we as young people were engaging with every single month or week or day. And when we came to pads and tampons, we thought, hey, that's a pretty crazy market opportunity. It's a big market, lots of money is pulled into it in Australia. But on the flip side, there is so much need in the area of menstrual health care. 30% of girls in developing countries drop out of school as soon as they get their period. And being young, empowered women and never considering that our gender would be a barrier for us, we thought that was just completely unfair. And so we decided to start this idea off by researching how to start a business. And then we decided to take a gap year after year 12 to really hit the ground running and see how far we could take the idea.
Okay, wow. So that's empowerment if ever I've heard it. Now, so then from there, I've got a question for Nicola Adams in terms of your understanding and real experience in relation to empowerment and what that means. What does a young woman need to become empowered, like Isobel has just described in terms of what she just decided and did?
Yeah, so at Huber we do social impact measurement, which is probably a bit of a unknown thing for a lot of people, but essentially we measure wellbeing and all the needs that people have in order to achieve a level of wellbeing. And wellbeing's a word that we use, it's a word that's used globally, but lots of people have their own definitions of that. So we hear people using the words flourishing or thriving or empowerment. And ultimately, they all mean being in a position to achieve your potential. So having all your needs fulfilled so that you can live a life that you really value. It's a very subjective thing because each of us would probably say that being fulfilled in life looks different. So we measure that subjectively, and we use satisfaction with life as a metric for that. So how satisfied are you with your day-to-day, with the life that you lead? And that is relative to those around you. And then we work with organisations such as Girl Guides to understand for their community group, or more broadly, we might work with, say, a location, so an actual community LGA or something, to say for that group of people, what is most important to their wellbeing? What needs do they have that need to be fulfilled? So it's a really broad question that you asked, but it kind of very much depends on the group of people, because for each of us, it looks so different, the capabilities that we need, the opportunities that we need in order to fulfill our potential and become empowered. So I can talk specifically in this case in terms of the Girl Guide membership, and that's both the young girls between ages of what we were able to measure, 8 and 18 years old, 17 years old, and then those over 18 who were either members or volunteers. And a lot of whom are on this call, I'm sure you did a survey or two. So in terms of that group, what they need to become empowered or to achieve a level of wellbeing, the results pointed towards younger members really needing opportunities to enjoy life. Which is really important because a lot of maybe funders or even people in the community think that organisations that focus on enjoyment, particularly for young people, might be thought of as a bit frivolous, but actually consistently across all of our findings across various different groups of kids, young people in different situations, enjoyment is a really strong indicator of someone having a high level of wellbeing. And you can, imagine why that is. It's kind of being free of stresses that allow you to go out there and have some fun. So enjoyment and adventure, also self-confidence, having self-development, Those were both found to be key indicators of high levels of empowerment within the Girl Guide members at a young age, under 18. And then interestingly, for the older 18 plus membership, and we're talking young women here, so say 18 to 30 years old, the factors are actually quite similar. They show up in different ways when you get older. So something that might look like confidence when you're younger comes up as more like self-acceptance when you're older, and leadership. So yeah, the factors kind of for that older group that lead to empowerment are around resilience, which was self-determination, and being able to have the opportunity to make a positive impact on the world. So being able to give back and be an active citizen, and also that self-acceptance, that confidence. It looks different. So
enjoyment. That's interesting. It's not what you would think in terms of empowerment. I have sort of thoughts of, Catherine the Great sort of thing, and so their enjoyment, self-acceptance, tell me if I'm wrong, confidence, that's all part of self-development. So they're key ingredients, aren't they, in terms of resulting in resilience? That's where we're going?
It's in terms of resulting in well-being. So being able to live a life that you find enjoyable and valuable, and that's our kind of goal in life, isn't it? To be able to do that. And the more empowered you become, the more research shows us, the more you want to give back to others who don't have that opportunity. That's certainly the case for the Girl Guide community. Yeah,
so empowerment and purpose. So Emily, I'm going to flick over to you. How empowerment and purpose, how does the guiding program, obviously give us a bit of a rundown on yourself, but the guiding program itself instill those attributes in young women today?
Sure. Thanks, Alison. I think it's been really exciting so far to hear about Isobel's story, but also to start talking about the outcomes that are born from the research that has been recently done. Girl Guides New South Wales, ACT, NT, is a member-based organisation. So for those on the call who are less familiar, we are nearly 7,000 members. So we've worked in our state organisation, but we've also worked with other state organisations to be able to deliver this research report. And so it's fantastic to be able to launch it here today. But of course, that piece around resilience and wellbeing is so critical. The Girl Guide program, we are a learning-based organisation. So we've been around for over 100 years. So since the dawn of our movement, what some of the educational ideas was that the fun, the activities, the engagement, the excitement of girl guiding is the sugar pill for learning. And so we very much focus on how do we make sure that we are equipping girls and young women with the skills, with the experiences, but also with the mindsets that set them up to be empowered and to empower and to engage in their communities. And certainly the Girl Guide program and the method that we follow is very much focused on connecting girls with one another, with their peers, with community, connecting them with their world and understanding that both our community, but also the fact that our globe is all connected. And we're seeing that more than ever today with the impacts of a pandemic, is what happens in one part of the world does intimately interact with what happens in our community. But of course, we have a focus also on experiential learning, encouraging girls to discover, to play, to have a space that is empowering for them, where they can fail and fail forward, knowing that they can be picked up and they can try again, which is such an important piece around resilience and well-being and grit and tenacity. And certainly that's again in the outcomes of the research, but also in the Girl Guide program is a focus on my path and my pace, which is essentially girls deciding the journey that they go on, setting challenges, working toward them. So there's a range of pieces of the Girl Guide program that since our 100 years has been very much focused on how do we build resilience, how do we improve outcomes for girls and young women, and how do we make sure as well that we recognize and respect the agency of girls and young women and ensure that we are a movement that leads with the belief in the voices and the experiences of girls and young women. And certainly that's something I see in my experience, having been a Girl Guide since I was 7, and now at 29 as a young woman, the youngest to hold this office in girl guiding in Australia. What that looks like is an organisation that genuinely believes in the potential of young women's leadership. We're an organisation that is putting that into practice every day. So there are a few different pieces there, Alison, in response to that question, but it's wonderful, yeah, what we're seeing.
An amazing number of programs. I like the sound of being able to set your own guide and your own pace. That's a fantastic way to do things. So, Isobel, you are an empowered and purposeful young lady in terms of what you've achieved with Taboo. Run us through with COVID and the like. You know, what would your sort of message be in relation to staying strong, staying true? You know, this whole self-acceptance and confidence. You know, tell us how it's been for you and what your sort of advice would be going forward.
Yeah, well, I think that my personal answer relates quite strongly to what Nicola has been talking about in terms of empowerment being able to enact your personal values and create a valuable life for yourself, which is different and unique for every person. For me personally, COVID was actually an opportunity for me to slow down a bit. And I'm not saying I would wish the world COVID to experience that. That would be incredibly selfish. But what I'm saying is that I found a silver lining in that. Stepping away from the day-to-day rush of life, I was able to personally redefine or perhaps recalibrate and define what my values were and my priorities, both personally and professionally. And I think that's an important nod to what empowerment is and how do you actually get to a place where you feel empowered. The first part is looking inward to understand what your values are. And mine may be in this space of period poverty, and which is a very kind of a global perspective. But someone else's may be raising a family, and that's just as empowered as mine is, as long as that person is finding satisfaction and I guess meaning and purpose in those relationships, just as I do with my team members and our relationships with other businesses and charities. So I really enjoyed sitting back and reassessing what my personal values were. I also really appreciated in this time that we're living in right now, where we have so much information at our fingertips, world issues down to what's going on in our local community, down to what's going on in our best friend's life on a day-to-day basis in social media. And it has its pluses and its minuses. It can certainly be overwhelming, and sometimes you need to check in with yourself and decide when to stop just consuming information about the world. But it is fantastic in that what we found at Taboo was that a lot of our social media community and the wider community was able to take a moment to consider the experiences of people that are living much different lives to them. And I think if anything, COVID's brought communities together in that we know we're going through similar experiences as those in London and in other parts of the world, where the virus doesn't discriminate. And in that sense, we can be a little bit more empathetic to each other's experiences. And if you find value and purpose in that, you can run with that and create a sense of empowerment in learning about other people's experiences, finding empathy, and then helping where you can in that space. So I would say, post-COVID world, reassessing values, reassessing priorities, and then enacting them in your day-to-day life to get that sense of empowerment that really starts from within, but in my opinion, has to spill out to the world around you in order to be satisfying.
Fantastic. Thank you, Isobel. So, Nicola, I might defer to you now. The formal report that was done by Huber Social for Girl Guides, I think it's important we probably go through that now so that we get the bones to all of this. We've been talking about empowerment and talking about COVID, but I think it's really important that we just nail exactly what it was that Huber Social interrogated and what the findings were.
Yeah, so we set out, working quite closely with the Girl Guides community, to work out what what we call a theory of change or an impact thesis is. So what's the change that they intend to have for their members, or at least the outcomes they intend to achieve for them in their lives and help them with. And then we set out to measure that to see, is Girl Guides having the change that they believe that they're having? Because we're hearing it all the time. But what we do is we put the data towards that. So you've got outstanding examples of young women who come from the guiding community. You've got a lot of testimonials coming from their members. But we set out to really understand across a large data set from within the member community, if that holds kind of beyond the individual testimonial. So that was to set out to understand what outcomes that Girl Guides was achieving. And then also using our framework, because it's so focused around wellbeing, if we want to use the term empowerment, we wanted to understand for those groups what was driving wellbeing, what was the most important factors, and is Girl Guides targeting those areas, or is it something that falls outside in the rest of the realm of life that Girl Guides could support, or just to truly understand their membership. So that's kind of the bit that I spoke about before, what drives wellbeing. So in terms of the outcomes achieved by Girl Guides, we again broke the study into the younger membership group, so under 18 and those over 18. So for the younger group, it's very much Girl Guides increases the resilience of its young members. We just saw, I think 5 out of 6 of the top outcomes were resilience-based. So that was about giving them skills and capabilities about adapting to change, building their determination and perseverance, being able to cope with difficulties, having problem-solving skills, so knowing what to do when facing challenges, and emotional regulation, so being able to identify emotions and cope with difficult emotions, all building kind of that resilience, which then interestingly we found with the older group was a very strong driver of high levels of wellbeing. So it's kind of, you start at a young age to build these resilient skills, which really helps them later in life once it becomes a real key indicator of high wellbeing. So that was the first finding. The second was, we touched on earlier, around that enjoyment of life. So being able to have fun and being able to go on physical adventures were really strongly correlated to high levels of wellbeing. So I don't know, I think most people on this call would have some understanding of how fun and adventurous Girl Guides is. So it's definitely a box that they were ticking very strongly, and providing opportunities to girls who might not have otherwise had that opportunity or would have had to find it elsewhere. For the older age group, it was very much around leadership capabilities and being active global citizens. So in relation to leadership, that was really around providing its members, or building capabilities in its members around confidence, so self-acceptance and self-love, but also the kind of ability to feel comfortable within your own skin in a group of people, and also giving them the skills to lead. And that was both within the Girl Guide communities, because we have a lot of adult members who are volunteers, or not members, but are just volunteers, who felt that they were building those leadership skills working with the young girls, but also very strongly the results showed that they use those skills in their work outside. So if they're employed outside of Girl Guides, they are using those skills to help them manage a career and build a career. And finally, the active global citizens, which is the term that we use, but it very much touches on that, having passion and purpose and being able to give back to the world, but particularly also building skills. And this is from actually across from a young teenage years up to being an adult. Girl Guides are very strong in being able to form their own points of view around current affairs and issues in the world, so that they'll actually go out there and find the answers to the questions that they have about the world and become strong advocates for a point of view that they've formed on their own. And they've got a very strong sense of purpose and connection to the world beyond themselves as individuals. So they really think about the world as a connected place, and they want to be able to give back. And Girl Guides gives them that opportunity to give back. So yeah, they're really the kind of picture. We always talk about the story that the data is showing, and it's very representative, I think, of people like Emily, who have been through the Girl Guides program, who are really well-rounded women, and it's the guiding program has given them access to lots of varied interests, but also varied points of life, and they become very passionate and independent thinkers who start to give back to the world they live in. So Isobel, I don't know why you weren't a Girl Guide. It sounds like you fit that definition perfectly, but yeah.
Get her in now.
We'll get her in now. So Emily, thank you for jumping on. So the study has really proven what you all knew and thought, really. Difference in words, obviously, in terms of empowerment, in terms of, I hear resilience and giving coping mechanisms and the like, which is absolutely wonderful. I've got a double question for you. COVID-19, and as Isobel was saying, you know, things change. So how did you change the programs to still manage to get those kind of outcomes? And what are you going to do, I think, you know, going forward? Have you learned something from those changes to then ultimately, you know, go forward into the post-COVID world?
Perfect. I think great question. I think there are a few things I want to pick up on. So firstly, Girl Guides is a values-based organisation. So all of our learning is so predicated on purpose and values around agency and empowerment and respect. Everything that Isobel shared before is central to everything that we do and have done for over 100 years. So in many ways, while COVID was an impact to us, we were one of the few youth organisations that were able to continue our delivery during COVID. And while we adapted, and there was lots of difficulties, obviously, that come with changing delivery models, that focus on engagement and supporting girls in their guiding journey was always and remains central to that work. So while things moved online, as we weren't able to have face-to-face delivery, we've had a history of guiding being innovative, because it has focused always on being relevant to girls of today. And in 100 years, the girls of yesteryear were quite different in their technology access and what they needed to be empowered. And certainly we've in previous years done things like mail outs to rural and remote communities. So in my view, what we've done with COVID has been part of that trajectory around constant innovation and moving to be ever relevant, to meet girls where they are at and ensure that they can still have the space that is empowering to them and still provide them with, again, the skills, the capabilities, the mindsets to be able to think about their place in the world during their program. So there was a lot of work that was done to move online, which we're really excited about. And there's a lot of learnings that came. I think, like lots of education-based organizations, and I apologize for the sirens out there, but for lots of education-based organizations, the move to hybrid or connected delivery, many of us thought it was years off because the change management process takes time. But what we've seen is when there is determination and a need to change, is that we've been able to advance ourselves in a way that moves the needle, which is important for us. So certainly for the future, what we're looking at is how can we embed some of these learnings about connected delivery, hybrid events, using virtual to connect people to ensure that we can lift up our focus on accessibility, flexibility as well, for an ambition that is to reach every girl and any girl. Because the research shows that, Nicola just said it all amazingly, is that Girl Guides is a powerful space for girls and provides some really foundational opportunities for future women, and it's definitely needed. So we want to be able to reach every girl and any girl, and certainly the learnings from COVID are there are opportunities to think differently, and we've got great people who want to be able to reach those ambitions so that we can empower every girl and any girl. So they're the reflections on what we've done and certainly what we're going to be doing for the future. And we think our future's bright because we are getting more members. We've done a range of different innovative delivery projects. We've been doing guiding, going into schools, into new communities, new growth corridors, which means that we can reach more people who haven't heard about Girl Guides before, or perhaps their family members weren't Girl Guides, and that means we can reach even more people. So thanks, Alison.
Fantastic, Emily. The international connection, has it actually increased because of COVID and the fact that you're online? I'm curious.
Yeah, look, last week or the week before, we had our International Global Conference. So it was a chance for all of the countries where girl guiding and girl scouting occurs to come together to be able to deliberate and look to the future. And at that World Conference, new members were approved. So we are now in 152 countries. In the Asia Pacific region, it is the fastest growing region, and we're seeing huge developments in all across Asia Pacific in lots of countries, new countries, but also more people within those countries as we think about new ways of delivery. And certainly when you think about that, when girls are meeting in local settings in community, is they're able to have conversations about what does the life of another girl guide look like in India or in Tonga or in Vanuatu, and they're able to really explore that from a guiding context, but also recognize that there are different experiences and what that means for, as Isobel said, building empathy, building compassion, but certainly also realizing that they can drive a difference. The girls that I've worked with as a guide leader have certainly created projects around human trafficking, around water and health and sanitation, the Sustainable Development Goals, work around maternal health and childbirth. So there's such a diversity where girls can decide what they want to work on and learn about that, but also take action for a better world. And really is that global aspect of active global citizens. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to challenge you all now, ladies. There's plenty of challenges that young women face. We all know that. We've been there, and all three of you really still there, except for yours truly. But I'd like to know what you think the main challenge for young women is and how you can overcome it. I'll start with you, Isobel.
Challenges the young woman. So, I mean, gender inequality still exists, and around the world, of course, it exists everywhere, and it's more obvious in some places than others. And we're really lucky in Australia. So many incredible women and men have paved incredible way for us to have the right to various things like voting or having roles in government that once our gender couldn't do, which is just absurd. But of course, with that history in mind, there's always going to be challenges. And a lot of the things that we experience as young women is sometimes more subtle and can actually be damaging in the sense that sometimes you question whether you're the one that's being too sensitive or interpreting things wrong when sexism still exists, just in more subtle and complicated ways. I think for us, starting Taboo, our main issue or the barriers that we faced were very much more so general barriers that you face when you're starting a business. It's a difficult task. There's always challenges. There's always points of exhaustion where you wonder whether you should keep going, whether it's worth going. It's always a bit of a gamble as well. And of course, putting yourself out there is a huge challenge in itself. And that comes back to empowerment, in that you need to have a strong sense of identity and a strong sense that the values and the mission that you're working towards is bigger than yourself, to a point that you're willing to put yourself out there and put yourself on a platform and share these ideas, and not take it too personally if you as an individual might suffer some consequences for it, because you're actually working towards a bigger picture. And so that's what really got us through the day-to-day struggles and the exhaustion of starting a business. And as young people, we were 17 and 18 at the time, and even more so than sexism, probably ageism was more of an issue for us. We didn't have much experience behind us, and we were the first ones to admit that. And one of the strengths I think we had in starting Taboo was that our first point of call was to have coffees and catch ups with people who were much more experienced than us. And we definitely we knew that we were young and experienced, but being able to acknowledge that and then using it as a strength instead of a weakness is something that you just have to consciously do. But we were very lucky because we had this incredible group of people around us, a community that was building, that believed in our mission, believed in our ability to see the mission come to fruition. And we were really lucky, even in our schooling life, being surrounded. We both went to an all-girls school, and we had some incredible powerhouse role models in that space that really showed us that gender wasn't a barrier. Practically, it wasn't a barrier. Perhaps the way that it's perceived by other groups and in society, it can be, but it's being a woman is no disadvantage. And so we kind of entered the space of graduating school with a confidence that we could do anything our male counterparts could do, and that we could absolutely learn from the experiences of those who were older than us as well. We just had to be confident in that space because we were the young ones.
Wow, that's interesting. I've not thought about the ageism as well. So put the sexism and the ageism together, and you have a hurdle there or two. So that is a definite challenge. Yes, Nicola, what do you think in terms of the challenges young women face and how they can overcome them?
Yeah, I'm going to cheat a little bit and pull on the data. But it's the data from Girl Guides, but also more broadly from what we've seen across just trends across the different projects that we do. And it pretty much ties in directly to what Isobel says, where it's very much confidence and self-love and self-respect based challenges that we see with women. Unfortunately, nothing that you wouldn't expect based on history, really. But it's interesting that, as you said as well, and as you showed, because you went to a all-girls school, you weren't in an environment where you experienced too much kind of challenges from being a woman, but it's almost ignorance is bliss. And what you see is, as girls or as young people start to age into young adults, so does for women the gap between the male and female around this self-respect and self-love space. So for women, it really starts to become apparent that the challenge that they're facing is around the fact that their self-love, for another word, self-acceptance, is really dependent on those around them. So it's really dependent on what others think, essentially. And luckily, if you've got a solid community like the Girl Guides membership has, then you're getting positive feedback, and your self-love is kind of, it's the levels are still high, but it's always a challenge, because if you find yourself in an environment all of a sudden where you are being challenged, you are being discriminated against, you lose that capability and that level of self-love. And the other thing is that we're very harsh critics of ourselves as young women. And if you make a mistake, that can really have a pretty big impact on your confidence. So again, I think it ties into, you're looking to others to say, did they say that? Did they think I made a mistake? But the data really backs that up as well. So being able to kind of bounce back quickly and move on and have that resilience helps to overcome those challenges as well. And you see it as adults as well. Confidence in leadership, in work, in looking around you and seeing what does everyone else think about how I'm going.
I think an important piece here, and definitely what we try to frame from a Girl Guide perspective, is understanding this from a public health intervention component, because when we start to look at some of the things that we're talking about in terms of the pervasiveness of gender norms, some of the challenges around body confidence and self-esteem, is that we know, and again, the research has been done, is that it has longitudinal impacts on outcomes for women as they age. So we know, and our Girl Guides does a lot of work with different organisations like the Dove Self-Esteem Project to look at girls at 12, 13 start to not put their hands up in class because they're afraid of how their body looks. And when we start to see a lack of participation because of concerns about how people are perceived, about things that reflect poor self-esteem or low body confidence, that has a significant impact on leadership and other types of engagement further down the line. So when we talk about things like the pay gap or women's political participation or economic empowerment, certainly I draw back to say, well, the intervention opportunity for girls at a much earlier age helps us again lay those foundations to build capabilities, to boost resilience, and certainly have a longitudinal impact around leadership outcomes and citizenship outcomes. And definitely that's something that I've loved that Girl Guides has given me, is at a global level, our focus so much is around recognizing that gender inequality still exists and there is work to be done around gender equity and justice. And Girl Guides provides an excellent vehicle to engage in that, because it is a space where we can lift up girls to be able to navigate these spaces, but also to lean into this work and be able to be leaders. I look at girls who are 8, 9, 10 running change action projects and firmly say that they are leaders in their communities doing work. They are showing and turning up every day for the type of community that they want to live in. And I think Isobel's award in the Young Australian of the Year demonstrates that as well, is that young people are leading. And when I look at what needs to be done in terms of young women, certainly as a young woman, we talk a lot about that double bind of gender and age. There is sometimes a focus on fixing young women or fixing women, but really it's about how can we also unpack these spaces to make them more able to engage with diversity in all of its meanings, where young women can lead, where other people can participate meaningfully. And that is definitely a focus for Girl Guides. And ahead of International Youth Day, the conversation in terms of believing in young people's voices, recognizing their agency and delivering on that work as well, because too often we hear pieces around young people just need to speak up, or maybe if the young women said what the issue was, but actually we can see time and time again people are standing up, taking action, communicating and being the change that they want to be. But we also need to work together to ensure that we can enable that change, and that the change that's being called for is going to be delivered as well. So yeah, thanks, Alison.
I also just wanted to speak to Nicola's point. I can so see that as a young woman. I'm 23 years old, and when we talk about empowerment and confidence and being able to represent your other people around you, that is something that it takes so long to develop. I'm still in the middle of developing all these things, and I'll be the first to admit that one of my biggest challenges is myself, which is just so silly. And I've had to work on things like imposter syndrome so much, especially in light of this award. But I think I'm just learning to just not, there's a fine balance of not taking yourself too seriously, but also taking yourself seriously, because you contribute, but you also know that if you make mistakes, if you fail, that is part of the development phase, and you need to forgive yourself for those things as well. And yeah, I think it's, no one gets to a state of pure empowerment. It's a continuous.
Absolutely.
And anyone, and especially social media and media in general, it can definitely put people on this pedestal and pinnacle of this empowered person, but you never see the behind the scenes. You don't see them at their talking to their psychologist. You don't see them crying to their partner or their family members, because that is part of the human experience as well, and that's part of being empowered as well, and being able to acknowledge your weaknesses and working with it and accepting it, as well as playing on your strengths.
Absolutely. Thank you, Isobel. And ladies, I really enjoyed challenging you there. So we go from challenge to advice. I'm keen to hear, Emily, we might go to you. what's one piece of advice you would give to a young woman right here, right now, in terms of where to, in terms of, post-COVID, but how to get on with it? What's your advice?
Oh goodness, what's my advice? There's always lots of advice that I can give, but certainly I think it's just back yourself and you can do it, because I think that, again, that belief that you can take each day by each day, but you can do it and keep on keeping on, and know that there are people around you to support you in this work, I think is probably the learnings that I often reflect on in terms of a community of support, but knowing that you need to back yourself as well. And the same with Isobel, in terms of your mind often fails before your body does, but keep on keeping on and battle the thoughts that say, oh, you can't do it, or you're not enough, or all of that imposter syndrome. It's very much in your mind, and keep on keeping on, would be my advice. So
yeah, take that deep breath and take that leap, and
yeah,
off you go.
And part of it is, I know we've discussed this quite a bit as well, but it's also that values alignment. Is, I think, as long as you can be resolute in knowing that what you're doing is aligned to your values and what you believe is purposeful, then really anything is possible. And I think that there's a great filling of the cup that occurs for so many of us in the work of social justice, knowing that we are doing the good work, trying to help and lift up people, and being focused on making sure we are always centering those values around empowerment and respect and compassion and empathy, and humanizing people as well. A lot of this work is that when we're talking about beneficiaries, a big focus of Girl Guides is that our members, our youth members, aren't just beneficiaries of change, but they're leaders and drivers of change. So by recognizing the humanity and agency of others, we can move things forward. And so a lot of advice.
Now, Nicola, rumor has it you were a Girl Guide. What's your advice?
I was a brownie and then a Girl Guide. My advice, in terms of coming out of COVID, I think we've all had a lot of time to look introspectively, to look at ourselves and spend some time with ourselves. And it's time to reconnect, because, research-wise, but just we all know from the year and a half now that we've had, that it's the connection that we miss. And a lot of what we've spoken about tonight, it's even in that confidence way, it's about who you surround yourself with. So you are, I've heard the saying, you are a reflection of the 5 people you're closest to. And I believe that about myself anyway. And when I put myself in a good situation, surrounded by people who, as Emily said, love and support you, and that are there to support your success, then you are far more likely to succeed. And I think, there's always going to be the doubters and the people that try to bring you down. But if you are surrounded by strong people, then that's the most important. So take time to reconnect. And as we come out of COVID, take time to have fun again, build some hope, and be young again. I think that's.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, Isobel, what's your advice to young ladies today?
I love Nicola and Emily's advice. I want to try and take that on. I guess I'll go on from Emily's chat about values and aligning what you do with your values in a way that gives you energy. I think before you get to that space, you need to know really what your identity is. And I know, it's so hard to define what your identity is, but I would just use one example. If your identity is primarily how you look, and that's where you get your value from, the moment that is questioned, it can really hurt. So and that's just one example, and there are so many things that you can put your identity in. But if your identity is entrenched in your values, in that you want to make change for some particular group or your community, or your value is in the relationships you have with your family and your friends, sometimes those sorts of values or that sort of identity is, you can bounce back from a little bit easier if you come across barriers and challenges. That wasn't very well worded, to be honest, but that's what I'm going to go with. And I also wanted to say that one of the most important findings that Eloise and I came across when we graduated school was that adults don't really know what they're doing either. And that literally everyone is going through this phase of life where they're posed with challenges or questions or decisions to make, and no one really knows what they're doing, and they're all relying on other opinions or what their gut's telling them or what their experience have told them, but no one is 100% sure all of the time, and no one is as confident as they may look, or and that's something that when we I guess accepted that, we were able to proceed with our ideas, knowing that we were learning along the way, as was everyone else. So I would say that's probably one of my.
Isobel, I can totally relate. My mother always used to say, duck on water. You know, look calm, look like you know where you're going, and underneath those legs are going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and just as long as you don't go round and round in a circle, you'll be fine. So the phrase, I saw it on a t-shirt recently, ladies, underestimate me, that'll be interesting. And that is just something I see in the three of you. If I can get t-shirts and send them to you with a girl guide, I think that would just really sum up how incredible the three of you are in terms of the values that you've got, the reasons why you get out of bed every morning, the experiences that you've had, the work that you do, Nicola, in terms of, you know, measuring social impact, Emily, in terms of where you're taking Girl Guides. So I've got a question for you, Emily. In terms of, you know, if someone wants to do more, get involved in relation to Girl Guides, how does one go about doing that?
Thanks, Alison. So at the end of today's webinar, there will be a slide that will have a QR code for people to follow and find a little bit more. I would recommend going to our website, girlguides-nswactnt.org.au. So they're the plugs that I need to make in terms of where to get the information. But let me tell you, the information is certainly, there's a few things. One, I would recommend donating. We know that we need to invest in girls and young women, and the proof is in the pudding. And as Nicola said, the evidence is clear that Girl Guides is an empowering space that is changing girls' lives and giving the right foundations that are needed. So donate is definitely one of them. But of course, if you are a woman, please come and join us, volunteer, or if you're not a woman, also volunteer. There are other ways to join guiding and support our work. But certainly we are always looking for more amazing volunteers who are excited about taking girls on that learning journey with them. And we provide a training model where we support women to be upskilled in how to be a Girl Guide leader, and then they're able to facilitate that intergenerational learning that is a cornerstone of what we do here in guiding, where we can share across generations, share learning opportunities, but are centered on lifting up girls and young women. As young women, we have a network of young women called through the OLAVE program. So I highly recommend getting involved in that as well. But I know certainly, and it's in the research of Nicola's report, is that volunteering as a young woman has been so impactful in my professional life as well as other parts of my life. And I can't recommend it more highly because we know that it's a great way to connect with the community and empower other people. So donate, volunteer, and get connected would be my messages for people today, and follow the links. Thanks.
Fantastic. I've got to ask, Isobel, where to from here? You've been Australian of the Year. The year's got a little bit more to run. So what's the future?
Yeah, so I've deferred this year from uni. I'm studying medicine at Adelaide Uni, so I've done 3 years. Taken this year off, so I've got 3 years to go. Next year I'll step into a role that's less day-to-day for Taboo, more kind of strategic, which will be Exciting. I'm excited for a new phase, and I do love studying medicine, and I can see myself going down a women's health path. So keen to get that on the way. But in terms of Taboo, we our kind of prime goals from here are to expand our range of organic cotton pads or period products in general. And we really hope to include some more sustainable options, such as the period undies, menstrual cups, things like that. And of course, we'll be working towards increasing our profit to dedicate to our charity partner, One Girl, who works to keep girls in school and women employed in Sierra Leone and Uganda. They have a few barriers that they've identified that these women and girls face in staying in school and staying in employment, and one of them is their period. So we're particularly interested in that arm of their charity, but they've got multiple other arms to kind of holistically work together to keep the girls in school and the women employed. But so we're working towards goals of profit to give to them. We have this incredible program called Pad It Forward, which has been created to fill the need of addressing period poverty in Australia as well, because that's definitely something that exists. And so we give an option to our customers to subscribe to our product on behalf of someone in Australia who needs it, like a pay it forward model. And we've got incredible organisations all around Australia who actually we then dedicate that product to, and then they distribute it to their communities. So if anyone would like to get in the loop of that, it's on our website, and anyone can of course donate every month for as little as $7 a month. If you need product yourself, we've got our product online and also in various retailers around South Australia, and hopefully soon around the country. So we're working towards obviously our mission, and that's through the sale of our product, but also through advocacy efforts, campaigning efforts, and sparking the conversation ultimately so that we can work towards structural and social solutions to period poverty.
Well, that's a pretty boring picture, really. Yes, fantastic. Oh, Isobel, look, you just, it's been an absolute pleasure having you as part of this panel. And before closing, I'd really like to thank both yourself, Emily, and Nicola for, really celebrating the centenary of empowerment, really, by the sounds of it, that the Girl Guides has really delivered, and to have that report to pretty much tick that box to say that's exactly what they've been doing is just an incredible, congratulations, Girl Guides. It's fantastic. So look, I just in closing, I'd like to thank you all online for joining in this evening. Our panelists, of course, it's been an absolute thrill, and I think Emma's got a few just final housekeeping in relation to where we can link in, but certainly I'd just like to say good night to everyone. Stay well, and if you're lucky enough to travel, please do so safely. Thank you all.
Thanks very much to everyone for joining us this evening. To learn more about these great organisations, you can scan the QR codes on the screen or click on the links in the chat box. We send out a link in the next 24 hours of the recording, and we wish you all a lovely evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.